Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. A piece of heavy metal popped up beneath his wrist and revealed the two muzzles, one, inside, which were already glistening. Lin Li stepped on the back of the crimson dragon, preventing it from moving. When he saw the muzzles glowing on the wrist of the alchemy colossus, he quickly transmitted his mental strength to the crimson dragon, controlling and manipulating it to change its direction several times in the air. Damn, it's actually a magical crystal cannon. Which pervert created this guy and added a magical crystal cannon to his body? Is this still a damned alchemy colossus? This is practically a battle armor that's common in science fiction. Lin Li cursed while moving the crimson dragon in another direction to approach the alchemy colossus. Lin Li was very clear about the power of the magical crystal cannon. The attack by the pure compressed mana would cause even a legendary powerhouse to be heavily injured. Although the diameter of the two magical crystal cannons of the alchemy colossus seemed to be smaller than that of the ordinary ones, Lin Li could sense that the mana accumulated in the muzzles was no less than in the ones on the exterior wall that they'd encountered previously. After two dull sounds of the cannon, two compressed rays of light shot towards Lin Li and the crimson dragon. Fortunately, Lin Li managed to make the crimson dragon lay its body on its side, so the two rays of light shot towards the pitch-dark sky after brushing past the crimson dragon's body. Lin Li turned his head and glanced at the wing of the crimson dragon, only to see that there was a black scar chart across it, so deep that Lin Li could even see the bone. Fortunately, although the crimson dragon had a physical body, it was still an undead creature in essence. Otherwise, the scar would cause a huge impact on its combat power. Back then in the Dragon Mountains, Lin Li once made a prop that was engraved with a disintegrating array in order to get rid of the alchemy colossuses. He then managed to use the power of that disintegrating array to get rid of the 4 alchemy colossuses. However, there was no way Lin Li could use such an amazing trick now, because he was facing a Titan-level alchemy colossus that the disintegrating array would have no effect on. Hence, he could not be bothered to waste time on it. After a few clashes, he felt that it would be more practical to try to find the weakness of the Titan-level alchemy colossus. Don't hide. When you're in front of the great Angelano, any of your struggles will only make your death more painful, the alchemy colossus yelled again, after which countless rays of dazzling white light darted out of its chest and flew towards the sky like fireballs the size of a house. Boom, the white fireballs chased Lin Li and burst open continuously. Blazing fireball? Why is it so big? Does its size contribute to its power? Lin Li yelled, continuously casting elemental shield with the Helios scepter, causing the massive fireballs to be torn apart. Fortunately, the crimson dragon already had some level of sentience and IQ after being integrated with the heart of an undead. Hence, it was not just mindlessly obeying orders like stupid undead creatures. Instead, it could instinctively avoid the bombardment of spells by the alchemy colossus. Otherwise, it would have been burned to ashes by the blazing fireballs if it had relied solely on Lin Li's command. The light of the magical crystal cannon and the various powerful magic spells directly formed a barrage in the sky that would capture even a mosquito. However, Lin Li was after all a level 23 legendary mage, and the compression of casting time allowed him to increase his speed. Elemental shields were continuously cast and wrapped around his feet tightly. While evading, he resisted some less powerful magic bombardment, and was getting closer and closer to the alchemy colossus. Ignorant human, Lord Angelano is just bored and teasing you for fun. Lord Angelano is now sick of you, so go to hell, the alchemy colossus yelled in anger, and immediately raised the long pillar-like spear in his hand before swinging it at Lin Li. Lin Li quickly drove the crimson dragon towards the side to escape the blow, and finally managed to dodge it. However, a strong attraction seemed to have suddenly pulled him towards the spear together with the crimson dragon. The elemental shields made crackling sounds, and Lin Li only managed to get rid of that force after 10 layers of his shields were broken. Lin Li's back was already drenched in cold sweat. He had to face the endless magical attack of the alchemy colossus from afar, and when he was close, he had to face the attack of the giant spear. Indeed, it was a Titan-level alchemy colossus, and the power thereof seemed to be able to tear through space. Lin Li had no doubt that if the blow were to really strike him, no amount of elemental shields would be useful, and he and the Crimson Dragon would be torn apart immediately. The Crimson Dragon's body was relatively massive, but it seemed just like a bird compared to the alchemy colossus. Getting close to the alchemy colossus was the only way he could retaliate. Lin Li continued to release elemental shields while riding the Crimson Dragon towards the alchemy colossus. Hehe, do you want to witness the unmatched close combat abilities of Lord Angelano? I shall fulfill your wish. The alchemy colossus had no consciousness, too, and blabbered on, but its power did live up to the descriptions from the Dark Age, and his giant spear seemed to have spun like a windmill and revolved around his body. Lin Li was about to get the Crimson Dragon to press its body against the alchemy colossus, but at this moment, he got yanked up, and the rotating giant spear swept past the body of the Crimson Dragon. Although they had again dodged a deadly attack, they were flung far, far away. Damn it, it was so close. Is this guy really an alchemy colossus? Lin Li finally regained his balance and stared at the alchemy colossus, only to see that it seemed to be more flexible than humans. His hands were continuously flailing about, and the giant spear was moving like a windmill that shrouded his body. Lin Li raised the Helios scepter high in the air and chanted a spell, after which he saw a huge ball of thunder being shot at the alchemy colossus. However, huge was only relative to Lin Li, and for the alchemy colossus, the ball was just like a random stone. The world-destroying thunderball was considered the most powerful magic spell that Lin Li could cast now. Previously, he managed to destroy the powerful defensive magical crystal cannons just because he had the world-destroying thunderball. However, now that he was facing the Titan-level alchemy colossus, the powerful magic seemed to have lost its due power. It disappeared as soon as it flew close to the alchemy colossus. Although Lin Li knew a lot about the alchemy colossuses, he seemed a little helpless now that he was facing the Titan-level alchemy colossus. Lin Li's situation was obviously not optimistic, and the enemy's strength was obviously beyond what he had estimated. Although Anduin and Rosen were at odds against each other, it was not the time for them to battle now. Their opponent was Osric's most powerful mage, the Lich Amateur, who was much stronger than the two of them even though they did not reach the Sanctuary Realm. Amateur was not as talkative as Angelano. From the beginning to the end, there was no other sound that came from him apart from the chanting of the spells. He rode on Nightmare's back and kept his body straight while pointing his staff of doom at Anduin and Rosen. However, Anduin and Rosen felt extremely exhausted, and they had temporarily put aside the grudges in their hearts. However, they were unable to enjoy a tacit understanding, after all, and could only use their rich experience to cooperate with each other. However, they were still far from sharing a perfect chemistry. In the face of the powerful magic and unpredictable curses cast by Amateur, Anduin and Rosen were barely holding on. Counterattacking seemed to be far-fetched for them. The nightmare that Amateur was riding was not an ordinary one. It was covered in golden flames, and apart from moving quickly, it even had a strong resistance against magic of all attributes. In fact, it was much stronger than Lin Li's Crimson Dragon. Rosen, what else did you bring from the Supreme Council? Hurry up and use it, otherwise there will be no chance to do so in the future. Rosen supported the elemental shield and suddenly flew towards the enemy while casting magic with his dazzling staff. However, after launching a complete attack, Anduin didn't see the results at all, and turned around to head in a different direction, avoiding the incoming offensive spells. The elemental shield outside his body had also been broken at this moment. On the other hand, Rosen waved his staff and cast powerful legendary magic while Anduin was being attacked by Amateur. However, they did not dare to loiter for a single moment, and immediately switched positions after casting the spell to dodge Amateur's offensive spells. Pisht, what do you take the Supreme Council for? I spent a lot of time and effort to borrow that staff from the treasure vault. If it were not for your lack of efforts back then, I would not have used it so soon, Rosen said angrily. He was filled with regret at the thought of the summoning staff. If he were to summon the two WYRMS at this juncture, they wouldn't be in such a pathetic state even if he could not destroy Angelano and Amateur. However, when thinking of the staff, Rosen began to wonder if he could borrow the staff, precisely because the arbitrator had long expected the current situation. Unfortunately, he got too impatient, and used his chance to summon the creatures too early. The Death Knights, who used divine power, were not able to cope with the power of these people. However, there was no point in regretting it now. Since the opportunity to summon was used in advance, he could only use his own abilities to find a way to defeat the enemy. Amateur was indeed Osric's strongest mage underling. Under the siege of the two level 23 legendary mages, Anduin and Rosen, he seemed to remain extremely confident. He didn't have to evade the magic at all, and even legendary offensive spells would only result in dazzling rays of light when they hit his elemental shield. His retaliation would leave Anduin and Rosen in a pathetic state as they heard the sounds of their shields cracking. Anduin, stall him for a few seconds, and I will prepare a ruthless attack for him. Hence, Rosen had to think of a solution to hold Amateur back while he prepared a level 23 magic attack. Anduin clearly heard Rosen's promise, and had begun to cast his magic. However, before he could even chant a single syllable, he heard formidable magic smashing into him. Anduin had no choice but to stop the spell casting. While dodging, he yelled at Rosen, "Rosen, are you trying to harm me? Damn it, I do want you to die, but not now." Rosen smiled wryly, and said, "I'm not that muddle-headed yet. If you have what it takes, try it and I'll prepare the casting." Of course, Rosen had already prepared. Although he heard Anduin agreeing to his words, he didn't start preparing to cast spells, and instead just stood still for a while. The next thing he knew, Nightmare's horn was about to stab him. As a level 23 legendary mage, mastering a few powerful top-level magic spells was normal, but no matter how powerful the magic was, casting would still take some time. As long as they had time, they would definitely be able to cast level 24 magic too. However, the problem now was that neither of them could hold Amateur back for even a second, let alone for long enough to cast level 24 magic. After a few attempts, Anduin and Rosen acknowledged the reality. The only thing they could do now was to work together and hold Amateur back while waiting for the changes in the other two battlefields. 1. I figure it's one muzzle per arm, so 2 in total. 2. Maybe the author meant smarts. However, they felt that the greatest possibility was probably not Lin Li, who had created plenty of miracles in the Sky Castle, since he could not even get near the alchemy colossus. Aldwin's mages seemed to be performing well, however. Despite knowing the problem that existed between the mages, Aldwin actually did not divide the mages into two teams. In terms of general cooperation, their chemistry was not affected to that great of an extent, but Aldwin dared not take the risk during the joint casting of spells. If an error were to happen again, that would be disastrous for the mages. For a long time, the mages had always been confident in the battling power of their team. Even though their abilities and strength might not be that outstanding, they believed that with their tacit cooperation, they should be regarded as the strongest force in Amrel. However, they had now met opponents who could be considered the real enemy. The undead creatures that did not give off undead aura had pure magical waves, and were extremely cooperative and in sync when fending off the intruders. Hence, the mages could not help but feel shocked, because the undead creatures seemed to have fused together and become one to form an intricate fighting machine. These necromancers are definitely Osric's magic legion. Aldwin thought to himself in shock while he continued to direct the mages. He had spent a lot of efforts on the mages, and was also very experienced in combat. However, he still could not imagine what kind of training the undead magic legion in front of them had gone through. Although there were more than 200 members in the undead magic legion in front of him, Aldwin felt like he was fighting a powerful mage of level 24. Joint casting was a skill that the mages were rather proud of. However, even the elite group of mages could not do as they pleased. They could only cast a spell jointly after practicing it thousands of times, yet they were now facing an undead magic legion that put out powerful legendary level 24 magic seemingly effortlessly. There were only 200-odd mages who turned into undead creatures. Aldwin couldn't imagine how terrifying the entire magic legion under Osric would be. It was no wonder that Osric's magic legion would raid more than 10 floors of the abyss and leave the arrogant demon lords with no choice but to succumb to them. Apart from the tacit understanding and seamless cooperation they had, each member of the undead magic legion also possessed extremely powerful strength. However, that did not refer to the level of their physical strength, but their mastery of time and magic. Every spell that they cast took up an appropriate amount of their mana without any wastage. There wouldn't be failure, because of a lack of mana, either. Their control over the casting even made Aldwin, a level 22 legendary mage, feel incredibly ashamed. They could clearly capture every gap between casting and catch the instant that casting failed. They would cast spells before every failure so as to attack the enemies while causing their defensive spells to malfunction. Their control of timing was far greater than that of the mage killer Aminos. Although Aldwin was a level 22 legendary mage, he was sure that he might not be able to endure for too long if he were to face the undead magic legion alone. He might not even have the chance to escape. After all, it was a battle of team power, and the only thing Aldwin could do was command his mages to roam around. Attacking was a luxury. However, Aldwin believed that as long as he retained the core, he would be able to establish a more powerful group even if he had suffered a great loss. It was because they had already seen what a real rapport, coordination, and magic legion were. Anduin and Rosen were forced into having no means to counterattack, and all they could do was continue putting up defenses and pin their hopes on the mages they were commanding. They didn't have the time to see that the situation in both other battles was terrible too. Lin Li controlled the Crimson Dragon and revolved around the huge body of the Titan-level alchemy colossus in a bid to find a chance to surge in. However, the Titan-level alchemy colossus seemed to be extraordinary, and nothing could penetrate its defenses at all. In fact, it was practically as agile as a warrior. Damn, is this guy even an alchemy colossus? Why is he even more annoying than a monkey? The Crimson Dragon beneath Lin Li's feet had self-healing abilities, but the new scars that formed continuously made those abilities seem insignificant. Lin Li waved the Helios scepter in his hand and cast various powerful magic spells against the alchemy colossus. However, the spells were easily dispelled by the giant spear, and were even blocked by a layer of light. That was the terrifying part of the alchemy colossus. As long as it had enough mana sources, its attack would not grow weaker and its protection would not be broken. He was just like a moving giant fortress, and it had the upper hand. Generally, the defense of the alchemy colossus would have to be broken or the power would have to be exhausted in order for the alchemy colossus to be knocked down. However, Lin Li knew very well that it was simply unrealistic for those rules to apply to the Titan-level alchemy colossus. Lin Li had no idea what mana source was used by the Titan-level alchemy colossus, but he was certain that Osric would have no problem using tens of legendary magical crystals as the mana source, because of how wealthy he was. Lin Li sighed, and once again drove the Crimson Dragon away while 2 rays of light from the magical crystal cannons bore 2 deep black holes in the ground. If only I had 2 alchemy colossuses. Lin Li was not thinking nonsense out of shock. If he had 2 alchemy colossuses, he would be able to try and lure them into attacking each other. In order to break the defense of the alchemy colossus, Lin Li would probably require the massive power of another alchemy colossus. Come on, incompetent human, aren't you going to give up? You'd better stand properly for Lord Angelano. One shot of his is all it will take for you to die without pain. Is this not enough to satisfy you? Dull sounds of hysterical yelling continuously came from the alchemy colossus, and the rays of light seemed to have formed a net of death which bombarded Lin Li. Lin Li's back was drenched in cold sweat. If it weren't for the fact that he had seen how pathetic Anduin and Rosen were doing, he would have really regretted choosing the alchemy colossus as his opponent. Ever since Lin Li had chosen this opponent, he was having numerous close shaves with death as the condensed power of the magical crystal cannons and the giant spear that could tear through space were enough to kill him. Seeing that the intertwining magical crystal cannons' attacks were darting towards him, Lin Li jumped off the Crimson Dragon, and took out the summoning lamp while putting the Crimson Dragon away at the same time. He had already done such a thing several times before, and after dodging the fatal net, he summoned the Crimson Dragon again. He then continued to leap towards the alchemy colossus. Actually, Lin Li had already found the alchemy colossus' weakness, and that was its joints. Regardless of whether it was an alchemy colossus or a Titan-level alchemy colossus, they did not have too many protective measures for their joints in order to allow them to move flexibly. If they were to use sturdy metal armor, it would definitely affect the movement of the alchemy colossus joints, without a doubt. With the alchemy array, the metal that could be used with it would not be strong enough to support the body of the alchemy colossus. The friction of the movement of joints would also damage the alchemy array. After all, nothing was truly indestructible. However, since Lin Li knew what the weakness of the alchemy colossus was, Angelano definitely did too. Although Angelano often called humans lowly and disgusting, he did not decrease the protection of the alchemy colossus joints. At least, Lin Li never once found a chance to rush into the alchemy colossus's direct vicinity. Haha, ignorant human, are you desperate now? You actually think that you can knock down the great Lord Angelano with such a pillar? The alchemy colossus burst into laughter. It was no wonder that Angelo laughed. A huge stone pillar that completely covered him somehow appeared in Lin Li's hands. Only the wings of the Crimson Dragon could be seen, creating a funny sight. Not to mention, it was incredibly fragile compared to the attack of the alchemy colossus, even though it was huge. What damage could it do to the alchemy colossus? It was a Titan-level alchemy colossus, and not a decaying wall. Even a madman would not make such a crazy move. However, Lin Li didn't utter a single word, and instead just held up the huge stone pillar and rushed towards the leg of the alchemy colossus. It seemed that he wanted to bank on the pillar, breaking the joints of the alchemy colossus. Whoosh! Lin Li and the Crimson Dragon suddenly stopped, after which Lin Li released the stone pillar and threw it hard at the leg of the alchemy colossus. Damn it, I'll give you a real taste of the Titan Dragon Spear. Lin Li couldn't find any chance at the end of the day. Staring at the alchemy colossus wielding the giant spear, Lin Li suddenly remembered that there was another thing that he'd obtained from the Haiga mountain range in his Ring of Endless Storm. Although the Titan Dragon Spear had already become deeply dormant, it still contained an immensely massive force of thunder. When he faced the double death dragons back then, Lin Li managed to throw his Titan Dragon Spear at the right time, and the razor from the spear helped him defeat the powerful double death dragons. Could the Titan-level alchemy colossus really resist the power of the Titan Dragon Spear? Lin Li thought of this and drove the Crimson Dragon towards the alchemy colossus again. At the same time, the quaint Titan Dragon Spear appeared in his hand, looking like an ordinary stone pillar. However, it had a tiny crack because of the attack by the double death dragons previously. Disgusting bug, you finally succeeded in angering Lord Angelano. Die. The stone pillar shot at the leg seemed like an insult to the alchemy colossus. When the spear was smashed against the stone pillar, his alchemy array began to shine brightly too. Boom. The whole space seemed to tremble with a loud noise. Lin Li, who stood on the back of the Crimson Dragon, was struck by the shock wave which rolled backwards. Lin Li had a hard time trying to stabilize his body again. Looking at the alchemy colossus at this moment, Lin Li realized that his Titan Dragon Spear had been flung far away, but there were countless electric ons on the body of the alchemy colossus, which was trembling uncontrollably. Lin Li could even hear the sounds of his teeth chattering. It's a chance. Lin Li urged the Crimson Dragon to fly towards the alchemy colossus continuously. He knew that if it was the Titan Dragon Spear used by the real Titans, it would be easy to destroy the alchemy colossus. However, the passive power that his Titan Dragon Spear possessed would definitely not cause permanent damage to the Titan-level alchemy colossus. Lin Li flew immediately to the front of the alchemy colossus. At this moment, the electric on the alchemy colossus also seemed to have weakened greatly as he raised the giant spear. However, Lin Li didn't want to miss this opportunity. He immediately activated his own light and darkness domain, and smashed his light and darkness sword against the alchemy colossus' arm joints. Boom! There was another loud noise, and the alchemy colossus's giant spear fell out of its arm, which also fell off its body. It then swung and swayed under inertia. The arm alone was clearly not going to get rid of the alchemy colossus' combat power. Lin Li did not hesitate at all, and he immediately again condensed his light and darkness sword, which he used to hack the joints of the arm of the alchemy colossus. Although the joints of the alchemy colossus did not have too much protection, the metal used was extremely strong and durable. Otherwise, it definitely wouldn't be able to support such a huge body. Although Lin Li was unable to build one, he had a deep understanding of its structure, and he needed not actually cut all the joints of the alchemy colossus. Although the light and darkness sword was powerful, he could not break all of the joints. All he had to do was to break a special point on the joint and break the balance between the structures. The body of the alchemy colossus would then break the joint by itself. After the two arms were broken, the alchemy colossus seemed to have recovered its mobility, but without its arms, all that it could do was to launch offensive spells. However, that did not seem to have any preventive effect on Lin Li, who was standing behind the alchemy colossus. Two light and darkness swords appeared one after another. The huge body of the alchemy colossus was finally paralyzed and lying motionlessly on the ground. Although the alchemy array was flashing on the alchemy colossus body continuously, and the alchemy colossus was continuously launching powerful offensive spells, all of the spells were launched at the sky because it couldn't move. Lin Li gasped after finally dispatching the Titan-level alchemy colossus. He could not be bothered to look for the Titan dragon spear that had been blasted away, and immediately drove the Crimson Dragon towards Alduin's battlefield. He could tell that even if he were to join Anduin, it would still be a tough feat for the 3 level 23 legendary mages to get rid of Amatir. Hence, he felt that he might as well help Alduin deal with the undead magic legion first. It might then be possible to defeat Amatir with all their strength added together. Although Lin Li did not have a good chemistry with the mages, he was still a level 23 legendary mage, after all. Besides, Alduin and the mages were actively cooperating. The situation on the battlefield immediately reversed. The mages who had been suppressed had watched as their peers collapsed one by one, so their hearts were full of anger, and they began to retaliate menacingly under Alduin's command. After all, it was no longer the complete magic legion, and their commander, Amatir, was still struggling and fighting Anduin and Rosen. Hence, he did not give them any instructions, and they were simply fighting based on instinct. They could still maintain a balance while having an advantage over the mages, but with the addition of the legendary powerhouse Lin Li, the balance was broken, and the undead magic legion would soon fall. When the last necromancer was killed, Lin Li, Alduin, and the mages did not rest for a moment, and immediately rushed towards Anduin and Rosen. At this time Anduin and Rosen had no means to counterattack at all, and could only defend passively. If reinforcements had arrived any later, one of the authoritative figures of the Supreme Council would have been lost. 3 level 23 legendary mages and the mages who had faced the Magic Legion were now surrounding Amatir. Although Amatir was known as Osric's strongest mage, he had yet to enter the sanctuary realm, after all. Under the maniacal siege of everyone, he could only sigh and turn into ashes with the nightmare he was writing. The whole battlefield finally became quiet. Some could no longer stay still, and thus fell onto the ground, while others stared blankly at the ruins in front of them. The other 2 of Osric's subordinates were finally destroyed by the mages, 1,300 years after the end of the Dark Age. Amatir, Angelano, and Aminos, the 3 legendary figures, were initially already gradually forgotten along with history, yet they actually appeared in front of everyone, making them feel like everything was surreal. After all, even Anduin and Rosen had never experienced what went on during that era. Yet, they managed to kill the legendary figures from that era. However, after everything ended, Lin Li did not sigh with the crowd, but instead controlled the Crimson Dragon and flew back to the Alchemy Colossus. Strictly speaking, the 3 killers of Osric had yet to be eliminated completely. Although the Alchemy Colossus had been rendered immobile, there was no lethal damage done to the controller inside. Based on his knowledge of the Alchemy Colossuses, Lin Li soon found the location of the core operating room of the Alchemy Colossus. After activating several magic gears, a small door slowly opened on the forehead of the alchemy colossus. To be honest, that little door was too small, not because it was relatively tiny compared to the body of the alchemy colossus, but rather because it was almost as tiny as a dog hole. "Come out, Lord Angelano. Otherwise, I won't mind throwing a few more fireballs in here," Lin Li said while knocking the staff against the small door. "How dare you speak to Lord Angelano like this? You will regret it," a figure yelled in a sharp voice as it crawled out of the small door. Lin Li finally understood why the door was so small. It was because the so-called Lord Angelano, who crawled out from inside, actually had a short stature, with a pair of big ears, a pointed long nose, and green skin. Goblins like him could never be found in Amril anymore. Lin Li was probably the only one who could recognize his identity. Not to mention, goblins had long been annihilated in the Dark Age, which was ruled by the High Elves. It was said that before the High Elves ruled Amril, the goblins had also created a glorious era. Although they did not have talent in magic or strong bodies, they were living in the period when alchemy peaked in development. Hence, they seemed to be extremely talented in alchemy. They manipulated the powerful alchemy colossuses, and could easily kill the powerful prehistoric magical beasts. It was precisely because of their talent in alchemy that they managed to prosper continuously during the peak of the prehistoric magical beasts' tyranny. In fact, they even almost dominated Amril. However, it was unfortunate that the High Elves had also developed by relying on their own advantages. There was inevitably a conflict between the two races, especially since the High Elves were clean freaks who could not tolerate living together with the ugly goblins. Hence, after several wars, the booming goblins were completely wiped out off the mainland by the High Elves. It was said that alchemy was created by the goblins. Of course, the High Elves had never acknowledged that. However, in the northern part of the mainland of Amril where the goblins had lived, which was now the region of Rotterdam, there were plenty of traces of goblin civilization. Meanwhile, in Rotterdam, there was a great development in alchemy, which seemed to have something to do with the High Elves. Seeing a goblin crawling out of the alchemy colossus, Lin Li felt incredibly perplexed and confused about what Osric was doing. Osric had studied necromagic and had 3 loyal warriors working under him. One was an assassin, one was a lich, and the last was a goblin that was supposed to have been dead. That didn't seem like something a high elf would do. "Alright, Lord Angelano, tell me some information about Osric's mausoleum. If it's useful, maybe I can let you go," Lin Li said while picking up the crimson dragon as he saw that the goblin was trying to flee. The goblin struggled at Lin Li while the crimson dragon picked it up in its mouth, and yelled, "Let me go, you bastard, I will never betray my master. Don't think that you can bully me just because you're taller. If you have what it takes, wait for me to repair the alchemy colossus, and we'll see how you die then." Lin Li flew directly into the air, and knocked the goblin on its head with the Helios scepter. He sneered, "Didn't you just crawl out of the alchemy colossus? I repeat, answer my questions honestly. Don't test my patience. You despicable human being. To the elves, there's no such thing as betrayal. I will never allow you to disturb Master from sleeping." Angelano stopped struggling and glowered at Lin Li. "Is that so? Do you think that I don't dare to kill you? Anyway, the goblins no longer exist and you must have been lonely all these years. I'll send you back to reunite with them," said Lin Li, whose patience was growing thin. The gemstone on his scepter gradually lit up too. "Wait a minute," yelled a voice that popped up in Lin Li's head. "Canoris, why did you suddenly show up here? Is it because of this goblin?" Lin Li asked, peculiarly. However, the glow on the Helios scepter did not seem to weaken at all. "Hey, I'm doing it for your own good. Don't underestimate this goblin. This guy followed Osric right from the start, and he's also the one Osric trusted the most. He knows a lot about Osric, and he's probably the most likely to know the mysteries in this mausoleum," Canoris advised. Lin Li shook his head and still did not extinguish the light on the Helios scepter. "So what? Even if he knows everything, it won't be of use to me if he doesn't say anything. Don't worry, listen to me. I'm sort of acquainted with this goblin, so just leave it to me to persuade him. If he still doesn't listen, you can take action. It shouldn't be too late by then, Kenora said patiently for fear that Lin Li might accidentally squash the goblin to death. Why are you so enthusiastic all of a sudden? Lin Li asked Kenoris while extinguishing the mana in the helioscepter. Nonsense, have you forgotten what you promised me? If I don't help you get the eternal furnace, how are you going to create a new body for me? I'm not going to let you keep me in this ugly hammer forever. Kenoris yelled in displeasure. Okay, I'll hand him to you then. I'll go see what they are going to go next. Lin Li took Angelano out of the Crimson Dragon's mouth and dropped him onto the ground before putting him away in the ring of endless storm. He then flew towards Anduin and the rest. The Crimson Dragon was sent to fetch the Titan Dragon Spear. At this moment, Aldwin had just counted the number of casualties amongst the team of mages who won after Lin Li joined. However, they had already suffered a lot of losses before. After all the battles ended, more than 30 mages died, while more than 60 were injured, making Aldwin feel heartbroken again. After picking up the corpses of their peers, the mages began to rest and dress their wounds, while Aldwin, Macklin, Anduin, and Rosen began to discuss the following steps to take. The 3 greatest guardians had already died, so the next thing to do was to enter Osric's mausoleum. That was originally not considered an issue, but when discussing, they began to have different opinions. Rosen proposed that there probably wouldn't be other enemies in Osric's mausoleum, since the tomb keepers were all dead, and there were also such hints on the map. He felt that there were no longer any traps to hinder the team from advancing, hence, it would be best for them to enter mausoleum immediately. However, Aldwin and Anduin were all somewhat cautious. They felt that although the 3 tomb keepers were dead, Osric definitely would not rely on just the 3 of them to guard his tomb. Besides, even if there were no enemies, they felt that it would be better for the mages to adjust their mental state before entering the mausoleum to better deal with the magic traps. However, when Lin Li came back and listened to the opinions of both parties, he actually disagreed to enter the cemetery immediately, and proposed to continue exploring the surrounding area, which was much to their surprise. Angelano and Amatir both came out of the cemetery. Since they are tomb keepers, the cemetery must be the place where Osric is resting. What else is there to doubt? I think it's a mindset issue. If you're scared, you can always back out. No one's stopping you, Rosen sneered. President Aldwin, what do you think? We lost plenty of mages this time, said Lin Li, who ignored Rosen's sarcastic remark and turned to ask Aldwin for his opinion. Aldwin was a little bit dissatisfied with Rosen, and he felt that Lin Li's idea was also the most appropriate. Anyway, it would only take up a little bit of time to explore the region. Hence, he nodded, and agreed, I think Felic's suggestion is much more appropriate. I brought them here, precisely, because I want to be responsible for their lives. I don't want them to sacrifice themselves in vain because we're too eager. Well, I also agree that Osric's mausoleum is not to be taken lightly, so we'd better be careful. Anduin, too, nodded and supported Lin Li's decision while refuting Rosen's. He didn't want to see more casualties amongst the mages, which was one of the many reasons behind his agreement. Felic, the operation this time is led by the Supreme Council. You're just the president of a small guild of magic, can you afford to bear the consequences? Don't forget who gave you support in building that guild of magic of yours. You'll definitely regret it. Rosen was infuriated to have his suggestion rejected by everyone else. However, after feeling angry, he glanced at Anduin again, and an idea popped up in his head. In Rosen's opinion, he had come on this trip with Anduin, partly for obtaining the item in the mausoleum, and also because of the competition for the arbitrator's position. If he were to obtain that item, he would undoubtedly receive the greatest credit for this operation and be given the position of the arbitrator. At the thought of this, Rosen's anger began to diminish. He no longer wanted to say anything to Anduin and the rest. Instead, he went directly to the rest of the mages who were resting. After hearing Rosen mention the Supreme Council, credits, and rewards, 20-odd mages immediately stood up and proceeded to the mausoleum together with him. Aldwin was infuriated, The mages that he had nurtured with all his efforts were actually poached with a few words by Rosen. Even a well-tempered and mild-mannered person would not be able to stand it. He immediately chased after Rosen and the rest. However, Lin Li reached out and stopped Aldwin. "President Aldwin, you can't make those who are meant to leave stay behind. Those who have stayed are the ones you should cherish most." Aldwin froze for a moment and glanced at the 160-something mages who stayed behind. In fact, as those people left, the remaining ones formed a complete team. "Felik, you said that there's something wrong with the mausoleum. What do you think is wrong?" Anduin asked while patting Aldwin on his back and turning behind to look at Lin Li. Lin Li shook his head and smiled, but he did not explain much. Instead, he said, "Mage Aldwin, summon the mages. I think we should evacuate for a while." Lin Li's words made everyone a little puzzled. At this time, Rosen had already entered the gate with the mages who followed him. As Rosen stepped foot inside, the entire ground suddenly collapsed like a river, which caused all of the hidden magic traps to erupt almost immediately, forming a huge magic vortex. All of the magic gears seemed to have also been stimulated at the same time. Various magic arrows and flying equipment seemed to have blocked and sealed the entire space. Everything was just a matter of moments. Before the 20 or so mages that Rosen led could even react, they were overwhelmed by the many magic traps and magic gears. In fact, they could not even scream. Rosen was the only one in the legendary realm, and he desperately retreated, barely making it out of the collapsed cemetery. The entire cemetery fell and vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye, leaving only a huge bottomless abyss, in which plenty of abyssal demons were yelling and roaring. Massive aura of evil dashed up to the sky. Without a doubt, the mausoleum was a huge trap that led to the deep abyss. The miscellaneous evilness, showed that even a powerhouse of the sanctuary realm would not escape doom after falling down. Rosen ended up leaving the mages to their death after walking into the trap, and managed to jump out at the critical juncture because of his own abilities. Although he looked rather pathetic, he was at least in a much better state than the mages. "You knew this since a long time ago, haven't you?" "You knew it." Rosen leaped towards Lin Li like a madman, but he was stopped by Anduin and Aldwin. "Master Rosen, please be mindful of your identity. I said that I suspected that there was problem there, so I suggested that we explore the surroundings first, and I also got the consent of Master Anduin and Master Aldwin. You were the one who chose a different path, so don't blame the incident on others. There's a limit to what I can tolerate. Even if you're an authoritative figure of the Supreme Council, you have no right to frame me like this," Lin Li said calmly while staring at the infuriated Rosen. Rosen looked around, knowing that at least for now, it would be impossible for him to find any supporters. He could only cock his head to the side and walk away from Lin Li after glowering at him. He still believed that all of this was plotted by Lin Li, and everything should be blamed on him too. However, he also knew that the task given by the Supreme Council had yet to be completed, and everything could only be settled after they left this place. As the authoritative figure of the Supreme Council, he would have plenty of chances to teach Lin Li a lesson. The team left the terrifying trap, but no one knew what to do next. Osric was a madman who actually used the endless abyss to design traps. God knew if they could escape and leave in one piece if they were to encounter another one. However, at this moment, Canoris's voice sounded in Lin Li's head again. "The goblin has been persuaded by me and promised to take you to the place where Osric is resting. However, he has a request." Lin Li immediately asked, "What is it?" "Surely he can't be asking me to find him a female goblin?" "He didn't mention anything about a female goblin, but he needs you to promise that you'll help him retrieve a journal from Osric's resting place." Canoris apparently didn't think that it was an excessive request. Anyway, things like journals wouldn't vanish after being looked at. Even for the most precious journals, what was valuable was the content written in it, and not the paper. "What do you want?" Lin Li asked the goblin. The goblin Angelano shook his head, and said, "I will tell you when we get there. Also, can you take out the alchemy colossus? It'll be useful for me." Angelo had been a follower of Osric for a long time. What journal did he need from Osric? Lin Li took out the alchemy colossus from the ring of endless storm while thinking about the journal that Angelano could possibly be after and had been waiting for until now. Perhaps Osric had taken the journal from the immortal king's laboratory in the Sky Castle. After the alchemy colossus was taken out, Angelano crawled on its body and quickly removed a few parts, filled with hope as he skillfully tinkered on the ground for a while. Soon, he actually assembled a half-armored mode of transport. Angelano climbed over the machine and controlled it to make it move a few steps. He then walked towards Lin Li and said, "Alright, you can put the big guy away, and then we can start." Lin Li put away the alchemy colossus and briefly introduced Angelano to Anduin and the rest without mentioning the deal he had made with Angelano regarding the journal. He simply said that Angelano had agreed to take them to the place where Osric was resting. He's Osric's subordinate, why should we believe him? Who knows if he will lead us into a trap? Rosen asked apprehensively, partly because he didn't want to see Lin Li claiming credit, and partly because he had been scared by the trap just now. If you don't believe me, you don't have to follow us. Lord Angelano didn't beg you to follow. Angelano's sharp voice was not too pleasing to the ears, but no one was bothered by it, because he was mocking Rosen. Under the lead of Angelano, the team walked in the other direction, and quickly passed the place where Aminos was killed before walking past the tombs of the High Elves. Gradually, the crowd found that they had entered a strange area. It seemed that it was no different from the original cemetery, but the tombs were much more gorgeous and delicate, and the arrangement of the tombs was also slightly different from the previous one. The ones buried here are the elite warriors from the Magic Legion. Although they have accompanied the High Lord to sleep, none of you would have had a good time even if you had made it here without my guidance, said the petite goblin Angelano, who sat in the machine smugly. Lin Li carefully looked at the tombs around him and paid attention to the arrangement of the tombs. With uncertainty, he said, could it be the undead resurrection array? Based on his sharp senses and instincts, Lin Li discovered that although the tombs looked luxurious, some of them differed in details, and these unusual tombs seemed to be distributed in the graveyard according to a certain pattern. Hence, it was very likely that the tombs were acting as magic nodes, but Lin Li had no idea what alchemy array it was. He guessed that it might be a place for the creation of the undead creatures. However, Angelano shook his disproportionate head and ears before smugly saying, "It's not the undead resurrection array. That thing is too low level. You know, what are buried here are the elite warriors of the Magic Legion who wouldn't become undead creatures. This array is called the Eternal Spirit, and will cause the sleeping warriors to be transformed into powerful spirits once activated. They would not only inherit the memory and fighting instincts from their lifetime, but also their strength. There will also be a great improvement." Spirit? Lin Li was no stranger to this name. When he was in the Haiga mountain range, he also used his Requiem array to subdue the Titan spirit. However, he wondered what the relationship between the Titan spirit and Eternal Spirit was. Could the High Elves turn into spirits too? Yes, it is the spirit. You seem to know the origin of the spirits. The Eternal Spirit array is said to have been created by the immortal king according to the formation of the Titan spirit. Angelano raised his head high as if he were the one who'd created the Eternal Spirit array. Since there are so many benefits of being a spirit, why didn't Osric directly convert himself into one? Why does he have to wait for others to activate the alchemy array? Rosen questioned while feeling indignant because the journey seemed to have been a little too smooth. He wondered if Felix was up to any tricks again. Ignorant human, seems like the trap in the abyss hasn't taught you anything. Is the wisdom of the High Lord up to you to judge? Use your brain. Or maybe you don't have one. Angelano did not care about the Supreme Council at all. After hearing Rosen's question, he immediately chided him mercilessly. It was said Titans could turn into spirits after they died because their souls would be baptized countless times and forged into solid and tough entities. However, although the High Elves were excellent, they had plenty of flaws, and could not be compared to the Titans. With the strength of the soul of the High Elves, they would only be successfully converted into spirits with the aid of the alchemy array. Although that was not common sense, one would basically figure out the problems as long as they had a little knowledge and gave it some thought. However, he could only listen to Angelano's lecture. After recklessly reprimanding Rosen, Angelano turned his head to look at Lin Li with a sullen expression, and immediately said, "Why, have you seen anything?" Lin Li continued to walk along with Angelano while carefully observing the ground and the tombs. He suddenly frowned slightly, and said, "There seems to be no magic circuit for the eternal spirit array here." Although Li Lin could be said to be very unfamiliar with the eternal spirit alchemy array created by the immortal king, he knew that magic circuits were required for powering alchemy arrays, ManhwaRecap, and magic gears. 1. The aura from the previous sentence. Even if there were no magic facilities, the magic circuit still existed. Lin Li found some traces of the magic circuit hidden underground. However, to his surprise, the traces of the hidden magic circuit seemed to have nothing to do with the magic nodes of the magic circuit of the eternal spirit alchemy array. Look closely at the tombs that are the magic nodes. What's so special about the stones on top of them? Angelano was very patient with Lin Li, as if he had completely forgotten that Lin Li was the one who beat him. After being reminded by Angelano, Lin Li focused his attention on the top of the tombs, and found that the magical gemstones used in the tombs that were magic nodes were the same as the surrounding ones. However, the cutting method was very strange as it was neither round nor luxurious. Instead, it seemed to have only a few faces. Is it a refraction? Lin Li's eyes suddenly glistened while looking at the distribution of the magic nodes, and imaginary lines that connected the nodes gradually emerged. Although it was only the tip of the iceberg, he could link it to the alchemy array. When the magically condensed light crisscrossed in midair and shrouded the alchemy array, it created a spectacular view. It was no longer just alchemy, but a combination of alchemy and much other knowledge. For example, the cutting of the gemstone seemed to be rather simple, but Lin Li could guarantee that the gemstone was definitely engraved with guru-level magical talismans. Otherwise, it would definitely not be able to withstand the compression and condensation of mana, let alone cause it to refract. There was also the support of structures, measurements, calculations, magic principles, etc., which allowed the levitating alchemy array to be created. Indeed, it is refraction. Once this alchemy array has been activated, the mana of the mana source will be compressed and released. Through the refractions of the gemstones, an alchemy array will be formed. There were two types of talismans engraved, one was to maintain the compression and condensation, while the other was to reduce the damage done to the gemstone. It would also refract the alchemy symbol at the corresponding position. Angelano was extremely excited as he seemed to have found a confidant whom he could tell all the mysteries of the eternal spirit to. Lin Li not only listened, but also raised several questions from time to time, extending the topic and arousing the interest of Angelano, who was eager and excited to explain. In addition to the eternal spirit alchemy array, they also talked about the magic traps and various magic gears that they walked past. This is a void trap. Through the power of the alchemy array, a crack in time and space is formed, and once the magic trap is triggered, the space-at-me rift will immediately expand, swallowing up the surrounding creatures and sucking them into the chaos of time and space. That will cause them to never find their way back. Note that these are the switches that trigger the trap. Be careful and follow me closely. Angelano told Lin Li and the rest to walk through the traps according to his instructions. It's actually possible to open a space crack? If the space is cracked, will the space crack erupt or will it dissipate and vanish? Andoin, who followed Lin Li carefully, asked the goblin in front of him after seeing that there seemed to be no danger around him. It will dissipate, but it can't be cracked. If it was just this one trap, there would naturally be no problem. However, there is a balance of power between the various magic traps here. If the balance chain is destroyed, it will trigger both the magic traps on the top and the eternal spirit array. Believe me, those warriors of the Magic Legion already have strong powers. If they are transformed into spirits, it may not be impossible to kill powerhouses of the sanctuary realm for them. Although Angelano gave Andoin and Aldwin relatively low-level questions, he would also elaborate on the answers patiently. After finally passing through the area of the void trap, everyone secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but Angelano told everyone with a serious expression that this was just the beginning. As the team progressed, Angelano constantly introduced magic traps with amazing power, and no two were the same. The dark and quiet place was simply an exhibition of magic gears and magic traps. However, the good thing was that with the exception of a few magic traps and magic gears, most of them could be eliminated. Otherwise, they would constantly be in fear, and even if Angelano was leading the way, it would be hard to guarantee that no one made a mistake. Lin Li had also learned a lot from the conversation with Angelano. He had no choice but to admit that Angelano's brain was really full of knowledge. However, just when everyone thought everything was going well, there was a sudden spookiness in the atmosphere that engulfed them without warning, as if the entire space was filled with danger. "Angelano, where have you brought us?" Rosen asked in anger. He had not spoken much along the way. It was a shame for him to have been reprimanded by a goblin in front of everyone, since he was an authoritative figure of the Supreme Council. If it weren't for obtaining what the Supreme Council needed, he would have already taught the damned goblin a lesson. Now, the peculiar atmosphere around them was enough to explain everything. Rosen believed that even his own competitor Andoin had nothing to say. Hence, he humped angrily and dashed towards Lin Li and Angelano. However, Lin Li extended the Helios scepter and stopped Rosen from reaching Angelano. At the same time, he stared at Angelano and asked, "The disillusionment mage with a ray?" "Huh, how do you know that?" "This is the immortal king, yes, it is the disillusionment mage with a ray." Angelano somehow swallowed his words and nodded in recognition of Lin Li's statement. "Felix, you really colluded with this goblin." "I doubt he'd take you to Osric's mausoleum so easily," barked Rosen, who was stopped by Lin Li. However, he was not actually angry, and was in fact pleased because it seemed to be chance get rid of Lin Li, and at the same time restore his own image while giving his competitor Andoin a huge blow. However, Lin Li ignored Rosen and did not make any explanation for his accusation. Instead, he said to Andoin and the rest, "This is a disillusionment mage with a ray. You just have to remember, everything is an illusion. When you feel anything, don't bother launching any attacks, don't make any defenses, just keep running forward." "Hey, where did you get the information about disillusionment mage with a ray?" Angelano apparently had no objection to Lin Li's claim, but he was concerned about how had Lin Li found out. Lin Li only smiled after hearing Angelano's question. He did not answer. He could never tell Angelano that he saw it in another world. Moreover, in the endless world, Lin Li had also experienced the power of the disillusionment mage with a ray. Fortunately, the endless world was only a game. For those who did not know how to deal with it, the power of the disillusionment mage with a ray would definitely be terrifying, and even a powerhouse of the sanctuary realm would be defeated by it. However, knowing the way to deal with it was like finding out the secret behind magic tricks. Everything would seem ridiculously simple. Just like Lin Li's endless labyrinth, which would seem insolvable to those who didn't understand it, yet all it took for Lin Li to get out was a few simple steps. Lin Li did not answer Angelano, nor did he bother about Rosen. Instead, he kept his eyes fixed on Andoin and Aldwin, waiting for them to make a choice. He also knew that it was not easy for Andoin to make a choice. It seemed to be almost the same as putting his life in the hands of others. "Don't listen to his nonsense, don't you see that this is a trap full of loopholes?" exclaimed Rosen, who had lit up his staff. If it weren't for Andoin and Aldwin, he would have long accumulated mana and bombarded them. However, at this moment, the surroundings suddenly lit up in front of everyone. The countless patterns began to shine, and the place was bright as day. Massive magical waves were constantly surging in from all directions, stimulating them. "Remember what I said," Lin Li emphasized, not waiting for Andoin and the rest to respond. He turned around and ran forward quickly, while the goblin Angelano maneuvered the alchemy machine to flee. Andoin, Aldwin, and the mages had also expressed their choice through their actions. They followed Lin Li, and no one dared to use any magical shields. The situation in front of him made Rosen feel rather troubled, and he could not decide between insisting that it was a trap and believing Lin Li like everyone else did. However, Rosen decided to follow the crowd. After taking a few steps, Rosen saw countless magic traps and magic gears erupt around him almost at the same time, and the entire ground began to shake violently. The blazing flames, the icy cold air, and thunderbolts began to overwhelm them. In the sky, a ray of magically condensed light shuttled back and forth, instantly forming a huge alchemy array hovering in the air. The tombs shrouded by the alchemy array split open one after another, and translucent figures shrouded in light came out of the cracked tombs, while giving out powerful magical waves that were above the legendary level. They were undoubtedly the warriors of the Magic Legion that had been transformed into spirits. After they walked out of the tomb, they charged towards the crowd without hesitation. Lin Li and Angelano stopped. There was an incredibly luxurious, extremely gorgeous palace-like building ahead. There seemed to be a deeper opening where stairs could be seen. Lin Li looked back and saw that Anduin, Aldwin, and the rest were rushing towards him as if something was chasing them. They looked rather amusing, but Lin Li knew that the space behind was definitely full of offensive spells. Soon, Anduin stopped beside Lin Li and looked around in disbelief. Aldwin followed, looking back, and was surprised when he saw the mages running in the silent graveyard. The mages also ran out of the range of the disillusionment Mageweth array one after another, appearing rather horrified. Rosen glanced at Lin Li with a complicated expression. Although he saw the palace, whose door was left wide ajar, he did not act on his own impulse, and instead waited quietly like everyone. Although he was unwilling to admit it, he knew in his heart that the success of this operation was largely dependent on Lin Li and the damned goblin. Just when everyone thought that the disillusionment Mageweth array was nothing more than what they had seen, the mages at the back suddenly stopped. They seemed to have forgotten Lin Li's warnings, and quickly put up their magical shields, with frightened faces. At the moment that their magical shield was held up, the robes of the mages were stained with blood, and they fell onto the ground almost at the same time. They even seemed to have stopped breathing. This is the disillusionment Mageweth array. Although everything is an illusion, it will be true if you think it is true. The only way is to run out of it. A small amount of mana would make you fall to it, and this applies even to sanctuary realm powerhouses. It seemed to be very simple, but after they personally experienced it, they all knew how horrifying it was. They continuously told themselves that everything was an illusion, and that they would be able to stay calm. When they were faced with a dagger, though, they would still blink despite knowing that it wouldn't hurt them. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. The deadly attacks and the illusions that they had seen were so extremely realistic in terms of aura and magical waves that they could not tell the truth from illusion at all. Even if they had been told that everything was just an illusion, it was hard for them to ignore it. Once they tried to dodge or defend, it would mean that they had admitted that the illusions were real. The illusory deadly attacks would then be able to take effect on their bodies. That had clearly happened to the last few mages who were falling behind. Looking at the corpses on the ground and recalling the horrifying illusions that they had just experienced, everyone was thankful that they had overcome it, but still could not help but feel anxious. "Is this the entrance of Osric's mausoleum?" Anduin asked as he pointed at the small palace-like building. At the same time, it also shocked the mages who were in a daze. Angelano nodded, and said, "Yes, this is the entrance. High Lord has been resting here for more than 1,000 years. However, I must remind you that I can't help you much after we enter, because just like you guys, I don't know much about the things inside." Along the way, there were countless powerful traps. Without the guidance of Angelano, they probably wouldn't have been able to break through them. Since the area outside the tomb was already so perilous, how could Osric really rest without any protection? Hence, Anduin, Rosen, Aldwin, and the rest had sullen expressions on their faces after hearing Angelano's words. However, it was obviously impossible to retreat. Even without Angelano, they still had to go on with the exploration. When formulating the exploration plan, no one thought that Angelano would be joining them anyway, hence, it was already fortunate for them to have gotten there with the help of Angelano. After a short break, the team entered the luxuriously decorated palace. There were very few ornaments in the palace, and only a large square entrance on the ground. The stairs were also extending towards the depths, and were concealed in a corner in the passageway. Although it was an underground passage, it was not dark. Long magic lamps that exuded a faint light illuminated the entire passageway. Lin Li and Angelano walked in front, while Anduin and Rosen followed closely behind. On the other hand, Aldwin and Macklin led the mages in the back. They carefully made their way down the steps paved with magical gemstones and slowly walked towards the depths of the passage. Although Angelano had said that he couldn't provide more help once they entered, he was much more familiar with Osric's habits than others, and Lin Li also had extremely comprehensive knowledge of the magic gears in there. Hence, the traps did not cause too much trouble to the team. After stepping on the stairs and making their way downwards for a long time, they began to lose track of the distance, but they were sure that they had definitely covered more than 1,000 meters. After finally making a turn at the corner, they were greeted with the sight of an exceptionally bright exit. Everyone clearly felt that the air in the passage was getting hotter as they approached the exit. The team walked out of the passage and stood on a large platform outside the exit. All of a sudden, their field of vision broadened, and it was as if they were in a whole different world. Looking down, they realized that there was a long stream of golden yellow magma flowing continuously about 100 meters below them. The smell of sulfur filled the entire underground space. There was a huge and magnificent palace suspended in midair above the long river of magma. It combined all kinds of precious and brilliant materials together, having an elegant and luxurious vibe that left them all in awe. To Lin Li, the scene in front seemed extremely familiar. It seemed to be just like what he saw when he entered the Gates of Ashes, except this palace was much larger than the eternal furnace he had seen previously. That's where Osric is resting. Apart from himself, no one else knows what's in there, but I can be certain that the dangers there are definitely no less than in the area outside, Angelano said to Lin Li and the rest who were pointing at the floating palace. How is it, Angelano? Do you want me to take you there? Lin Li had already exhibited his flying skills and flown away from the platform. Obviously, he intended to proceed to the palace. Don't underestimate Lord Angelano. Such a short distance is peanuts. Angelano exclaimed while pulling the joystick of the alchemy machine with his slender arm. The legs of the alchemy machine immediately lit up the complicated alchemy array and slowly flew upwards. Lin Li didn't say anything anymore, and instead turned around to look at Anduin and the rest. All of a sudden, he dodged, and it was as if a sharp arrow had shot the palace in the distance, or rather the eternal furnace. Honestly, when Lin Li had got the eternal furnace, he was extremely shocked, but he was also full of disdain when he heard that Osric was trying to replicate the Sky Castle. It was because the eternal furnace was far inferior to the Sky Castle. However, now that Lin Li was in front of the gate of the palace, although he had yet to see the interior design and arrangement, he felt that the eternal furnace was really very similar to the Sky Castle. Compared to the eternal furnace that Lin Li had, the palace was much bigger, and the facilities were also more perfect in all aspects. That was the true masterpiece of Osric. Soon, Anduin and the rest of the mages who were using the levitation spell also landed safely in front of the palace. Everyone looked at everything in front of them with excitement they could not hide in their eyes. Regardless of what kind of deadly perils there were in the palace, the fact that they were standing there meant that they were already close to Osric's treasure. Hence, it was difficult for anyone to keep calm in this time. Everyone knew that such a magnificent palace could not be built just with many precious materials. The various knowledge involved in it might have exceeded the peak of what mortals could grasp. Regardless of what heinous things the High Lord Osric had won in the Dark Age, everyone could not help but be in awe and admiration of the majestic palace. Suppressing the shock and terror within them, everyone stepped into the palace, only to be bedazzled by the splendid decorations inside. Their definition of magnificence and luxury had been improved countless times. The beautiful and extravagant style of the High Elves was vividly reflected in this palace. Even the legendary luxurious palace that the High Elven Queen had lived in was probably inferior to this. The walls of both sides of the palace were covered with large and exquisite murals. Apart from the intricacy and beauty of murals, the precious materials used were also extremely amazing and eye-catching. The outlines made using precious materials, while the gilded clothing, the accessories, and the magical weapons were all inlaid with genuine, rare magical gemstones. Red fiery infernal magic iron was shining brilliantly together with rainbow adamantine and pure magical crystals that did not have a single trace of impurities. The many precious materials were extremely rare, yet they were casually used in the construction of the palace as ordinary building materials. It was as if they were not precious at all. Everyone could see the gilded and fancy interior of the magnificent palace, which seemed spacious and calm. However, no one knew what fatal perils were hidden amidst the peace. Even though everything in the palace, including the tiles on the ground, was particularly tempting to them, they did not dare to let their guard down, because they did not forget that Osric was the owner of this territory. Osric was no philanthropist, and wouldn't display his wealth for adding to their collection. The perils awaiting in this palace were unknown. Lin Li could only rely on his rich knowledge to discover some things that the rest did not know about through some clues he found. Although he couldn't see everything, he was certain that they were not worrying for nothing. The beautifully carved murals inlaid with magnificent gemstones might be beautiful pieces of art in the eyes of others, but in Lin Li's opinion, they were very likely to be a powerful alchemy array if some lines were erased. The dazzling decorations in the palace, such as the sculptures and the oil lamps, seemed to have no other striking quality apart from their exquisiteness, yet Lin Li felt that they were more likely to be powerful magical weapons meant for guarding the palace. The designs reminded Lin Li of the psychic array in the Sky Castle, which was combined and fused together with the conquering mage. Although he could vaguely see some ingenious designs through this brief observation, he believed that there were more that he had yet to see. Even Lin Li, who had experienced the Sky Castle before, could not help but admire the intelligent design. Apart from its luxurious decor, the palace seemed to be extremely ordinary. In Lin Li's opinion, it appeared akin to the mouth of a huge beast which devoured everything. Every corner in the palace was full of fatal perils. The team of less than 200 people was just like a ruptured boat that would be swept and capsized by a small wave here. "Felix, did you manage to see anything?" Andoin asked Lin Li worriedly. Now, this trust for Lin Li had risen to a new level. His knowledge in pharmaceutics had surpassed that of the Pharmacist Guild, his skills in forging had overpowered the Adventurers Guild, and he had displayed plenty of understanding of magic gears. Andoin did not know what this student of his could not achieve. Lin Li made eye contact with Angelano before he glanced back. "It seems to be peaceful in here, but there are traps everywhere. A little bit of carelessness would bury us here." Crowd was not surprised by Lin Li's words. Although they did not understand the designs within the palace, they could sense the need to take precautions. Even Rosen, who always liked to target Lin Li, only moved his lips and said nothing. Lin Li and Angelano were considered to have the most understanding of magic gears and magic traps. Hence, the two of them continued to walk in front of the team. They were in charge of detecting the traps that were hidden in the midst of all the luxurious furnishings. Although Lin Li had a very comprehensive knowledge, and Angelano had deep understanding about Osric, neither of them dared to take the matter lightly. It was definitely not an exaggeration to say that the team was moving slower than a snail. Lin Li and Angelano took a day to overcome a dozen magic traps, and the team had only advanced a dozen meters. Although nothing happened across those dozen meters, everyone took each step with trepidation. It was as though they were wandering between life and death at every moment. Each time Lin Li and Angelano discovered a magic trap, everyone in the team had their heart raised to their throat. No one dared to take a deep breath for fear that they would affect Lin Li's and Angelano's focus when solving the magic trap. They could guess that the traps left behind by Osric were definitely not any low-level magic arrow traps. If they were activated, no one in the team would be able to escape doom. As compared to the rest of the people in the team, Lin Li and Angelano showed no signs of nervousness as they tried to solve each of the traps. They had seemingly light-hearted discussions around each of the traps. Of course, being light-hearted did not mean that they were belittling the lethality of the traps. Their calmness helped them to look at the problems more holistically. Lin Li absolutely did not wish to bury his life here by committing a mistake at a critical moment. This quick freeze trap is a creation of mine. This trap would be able to freeze anyone below the legendary level when activated. Since Osric used the trap here, I bet he did not expect that I would come here one day, Angelano commented proudly to Lin Li upon recognizing the trap. It was indeed an honor to see that High Lord Osric had used a trap he created in the Eternal Furnace. Yet, Lin Li was not amused by his discovery. Is that so? I can roughly tell the principles behind this trap, but if you take a closer look, you will find something extra in there, he replied as he pursed his lips disapprovingly while pointing to some magic circuits within the trap. What? Angelano exclaimed after taking a closer look at the direction of Lin Li's finger. Isn't that the mana igniting curse? That fella actually cast it on a trap I created? What a joke. Doesn't the mana igniting curse get rid of the mana in the magic trap? He is such a muddlehead. If you took a closer look, you would see that this magic rune is here to enhance the curse on its victim. I bet even unlucky legendary powerhouses would suffer from that, replied Lin Li. Although he was a mage, curses were not foreign to Lin Li. The effect of the mana-igniting curse was to instantaneously inhibit defensive spells such as elemental shields. The thing that surprised Lin Li was not the curse, but the integration of the mana-igniting curse and the quick freeze trap. The quick freeze trap was considered a master-level trap. The integration with the mana-igniting curse brought the power of the trap to the peak of the master level. A legendary powerhouse would be killed by such a trap if he was careless. He noticed Osric's interest in integrating multiple things together. There was the combination of the psychic array and the conquering mageweth, as well as the hiding of powerful weapons within the beautiful decorations. The traps Lin Li had solved previously were all singular traps, or traps that were combined with related items. It was his first time seeing a compound magic trap where there was a combination of two of such effects. Lin Li had an ominous feeling that the traps would be getting crazier from this point onwards. Lin Li could only persuade himself to focus on the present hurdle before he'd think about what was to come. Lin Li quickly thought about the ways to deactivate the trap. He knew that compound magic traps were not simply a combination of two traps. There were many inextricable relations between the magic circuits, and the deactivating of one circuit might lead to the activation of another. After careful observation, Lin Li glanced at Angelano, who was standing beside him. His cold gaze made that goblin shudder. He spoke, "Angelano, this trap would require you make a sacrifice." After some bargaining, Lin Li promised to repay Angelano with a level 15 magic traps. Angelano proceeded to manipulate the alchemy machine and walked towards one of the triggers of the trap. Lin Li signaled to Angelano when he was ready. Angelano did not dare to delay at all. He triggered the magic trap and instantly released the mana-igniting curse. The entire alchemy machine was quickly covered by a faint red mist, and it started to tremble. Angelano was seated in the machine, screaming agonizingly as though he was in great suffering. At the same time, Lin Li cast a phantom the very moment the quick freeze trap lit up. His figure started to shift as though he was teleporting. Streaks of bright magic circuits became dim immediately. In less than a second's time, Lin Li's figure reappeared from the phantom, symbolizing the successful deactivating of a compound magic trap. It was a blessing to have Angelano's alchemy machine. It withstood the erosion of the mana-igniting curse and helped Lin Li save on the need to create potions to deal with the curse. "Hey, you told me it wouldn't hurt. You have to repay me with at least one legendary magical crystal for my roasted buttocks." Angelano hopped onto the ground and rubbed his buttocks as he spun around the alchemy machine. "I am a man of honor. I will never change what I promised." "Here, this is the level 15 magical crystal we agreed on," replied Lin Li as he threw a magical crystal towards Angelano. Angelano caught the magical crystal. "Do not ever expect me to help you in the future," he cried unhappily as he replaced the mana source of the alchemy machine. "Then, does that mean that I do not have to return you that diary?" Lin Li asked dismissively as he advanced forward. He found another magic trap. Humans are definitely the most shameless creatures in the world, snapped Angelano disdainfully as he controlled the alchemy machine and got to Lin Li's side. It was as Lin Li had expected. Compound magic traps had become a common sight for the rest of their journey. Osric had maximized the potential of the fusion of the integrative technique. At the same time, those complicated magic circuits grew increasingly discreet and unfathomable. The progress of the team slowed down tremendously again. Angelano would not be the only one helping Lin Li every time he had to deactivate a trap. There would also be tasks assigned to Anduin and Rosen, as well as Aldwin and his team of mages. Everybody trod on the short journey fearfully. It was the most terrifying mission they had ever embarked on. If they could, they would rather confront a WYRM than to suffer from the invisible pressure here. However, to Lin Li, it was a thrilling mission that brought benefits along the way. He acquired new insights with the deactivation of every compound magic trap. This not only included the knowledge on the construction of magic traps and magic gears, but also involved the direct use of spells, curses, and various nomological power. These were all the product of Osric's wisdom, and they had all been exposed with the help of Lin Li's meticulous effort. Angelano continued to nag while Lin Li worked on the traps. He talked about the origin of each of the magic traps and how he played a part in it. If not for his bit of usefulness for the traps, Lin Li would have bashed him up. The team inched closer towards the core of the palace as time passed. They were like droplets breaking through a rock. Although they only covered a dozen meters every day, they managed to get closer and closer to the core of the palace. When they got there, Lin Li discovered that the scene at core of the palace looked increasingly similar to that of the Eternal Furnace. The main paths and facilities were identical, as though it was another Eternal Furnace. Yet, this discovery did not convince Lin Li to treat the matter less seriously. After all, Osric had emptied the Eternal Furnace. Lin Li had not faced any dangers when he entered the Eternal Furnace then, but he knew it wouldn't be the same here. This place had to be Osric's finished work. Hence, all the dangers he had not encountered at the Eternal Furnace had to be here. Of course, Lin Li was not least bit disappointed. He knew that his prior knowledge of this place would definitely give him an advantage over the others. Although Rosen had toned down quite a bit recently, Lin Li did not expect that this would last long. He could already foresee a clash between himself and Rosen in time to come. However, Lin Li did not have to worry about Rosen just yet. The wisdom of the High Lord was the main problem. Just when Lin Li thought that he had deactivated another magic trap, there was a sudden burst of magical wave. Right after, the 16 statues around them started to walk down from their stone platforms. It was lucky that precautions had been taken when they were deactivating the magic traps. When the 16 statues start to move towards the crowd majestically, no one was taken aback. They took instructions from Aldwin and prepared to battle the statues with their crescent staffs that were glistening with rays of magic. The 16 statues got up close to the team in a few steps. Each of the spears and swords in their hands had a halo of combat energy. They were filled with thirst for blood as they attacked Lin Li's team. Despite using heavy-duty weapons and gigantic size, their actions were incredibly agile. Their teamwork was comparable to that of the team of mages. I thought you said you had deactivated the magic traps? What are these statues? Rosen could not help but snap at Lin Li accusingly. Lin Li was indifferent to Rosen's criticism. He was too lazy to give him a response. Lin Li stepped aside to show his lack of interest in participating in the battle. Although each of the 16 statues had the ability close to the legendary level, they were still at a great disadvantage in the confrontation with the team of mages. Lin Li knew that they posed no threat to the team. Unlike him, Angelano, who had been helping with the deactivation of magic traps, became agitated by Rosen's criticism. If Osric's traps are so easy to deactivate, why aren't you helping? Do not join this team if you have the ability to do it yourself. You have no right to nag in front of the almighty Angelano, he retorted in a shrill voice. Boom! The heavy swords of the statues struck the magic shields. They created ripples of magical waves and cast numerous spells that engulfed them instantaneously. When the rays of magic dispersed, there were only piles of debris left on the ground. None of the mages had expected such a result. They had expected the enemy within the palace to be more powerful than what they'd dealt with outside. But, it seemed that these statues were lousier than the silver knights they had met previously. No matter how great of an impact their attack could bring, their ability in defending against magic spells was pathetic. Of course, the large team could have been left with a few men if not for Angelano's help. Then, these statues would have been a real threat for them. The 16 statues were swallowed by the magic storm instantly, and they left behind a bunch of debris. This had to be the most relaxing battle the mages had from the time they entered the mausoleum. Yet, Lin Li, who had not been participating in any battle up till now, suddenly felt a chill up his spine. A shadow emerged from the darkness and waved a dagger at his throat as he deployed an elemental shield. Lin Li had found 20 alchemy shadow assassin puppets in Immortal King's laboratory, and he discovered how to control them, yet he still could not understand why Osric had not brought the shadow assassins away when he emptied the laboratory. Now, Lin Li's query was resolved. It was obvious that the shadow assassins here had greater power. There was not only one shadow assassin. Just when the others were feeling relieved after they had defeated all the statues, shadows sprung out from different corners of the palace and struck at them. The ability of these shadow assassins was comparable to that of the first 2 shadow assassins Lin Li had met at Immortal King's laboratory. They were definitely in the legendary level. Lin Li had used the soul-devouring domain's light and darkness sword to deal with the 2 shadow assassins then. But now, he did not intend to do the same. He knew that the ability of his current team was far better than before. He had the confidence that the team had the ability to overcome more than 20 shadow assassins. Although the team of mages had suffered significantly, it was a fact that the remaining mages had improved tremendously. Their sense of camaraderie was an impregnable fortress that turned the sneak attack into a confrontation. As shadow assassins were not created to confront their enemies directly, they would be at a disadvantage when they clashed with the team of mages. Streaks of black lightning swirled around the team of mages to scan for their weaknesses, yet the team of mages let out a magic storm every time an assassin slowed down. Although the body of each assassin was made of shadow iron, it did not have the ability to withstand the extremity of the magic attack. It was torn into pieces instantly. As the shadows around the team of mages were reduced rapidly, a thunderbolt struck the mages like a storm. Suddenly, gusts of crazy wind appeared in the palace and brought wind elementals out of nowhere. Their upper bodies resembled humans, but their lower bodies were like tornadoes that shot lightning in all directions. It was like what Lin Li saw in the Seven-Realm Spiral. Although the ability of the wind elementals was at maximum of level 17 or level 18, which was not comparable to the shadow assassins, their numbers grew over 300, and they surrounded the team of mages as well as Lin Li and the others. Streaks of thunderbolts landed on the mage's defensive mechanism like massive wind blades. However, although the number of wind elementals was greater than the number of mages, it was obvious that they had no teamwork. The wind elementals only knew to smash powerful spells into the mages repeatedly. After a while, the mages regained the initiative. Some of them took charge of defense, while the others gathered all their firepower to create a highly effective spell to counter each of the wind elementals. The battle came and ended really quickly. Although 300 wind elementals was a huge number, the team of mages did not allow the battle to continue for long. Everybody sighed in relief as the last wind elemental dissipated. Macklin touched the staff in his hands and said, "Seems like this is nothing much." Although it was a little nerve-wracking at first, it seems like the ability of these enemies was not even comparable to what we met outside. Indeed, the 16 statues, the shadow assassins, and the army of wind elementals were similar in how they appeared very suddenly. Yet, the biggest threat faced by the men was only the team of Death Knights with divine power. Lin Li could not help but feel weirded out by the unexpected weakness demonstrated by the core of the palace's defenses. At the same time, Lin Li heard Kenora scoff in his mind. "This is the mausoleum of the High Lord Osric. How could you use human logic to make sense of this place?" "Wait for it." There should be greater things lying ahead, he spoke in disgruntlement. Kanora's sarcastic warning surprised Lin Li. Although Kanoris did not have much knowledge of the palace, the understanding he had of Osric had to be beyond imagination. After all, he had been with Osric when the latter constructed the eternal furnace. If he said that, did that mean there would really be more things that had yet to appear? Lin Li did not manage to convey his thoughts to the others. Before he could warn them, a terrifying gust of magical wave erupted within the palace. Blazing flames came to life in the empty palace. The tongues of the flames licked the ceiling of the palace, and the rising flames emanated a pungent evil aura. A huge figure emerged from the flames slowly. The men could see that it had a huge pair of horns on a head that resembled a wyrm's, and a body that looked like it had been soaked in fresh blood. There were also crimson scales covering the body and huge pair of wings on its back. An inconspicuous yet insidious face and pair of wings appeared from the blazing flames. The huge body that was covered in scales emitted a suffocating and tyrannical aura. It was as though it had the power to destroy and engulf everything in the space instantaneously. Darn it! That's a fire demon. How would a fire demon from the 66th level of Abyss be in such a place? Lin Li and the rest could not help but cuss at the sight of the demon. It was general knowledge that the deeper into the Abyss, the more dangerous the demons would be. Even the almighty Dragon of Destruction chose to be at the 25th level of the Abyss. The 66th level was definitely the forbidden ground in the endless abyss. Almost all of the demons that lived in that level were those had close relations to the ancient deities in the age of mythology. The fire demon was the direct descendant of the ancient deities, and had the purest blood of a deity. The demon's identity as an ancient deity's descendant did not matter to the men. What mattered to them was the terrifying power he openly exhibited. Even though Lin Li was at the peak of level 23, and Anduin and Rosen were esteemed legendary mages at the same level, they could not help but feel nervous. Sanctuary Realm. The men could sense that the fire demon had the aura of the Sanctuary Realm. Even though it was not entirely in the realm yet, the fact that it was dangerously close to the realm was what mattered the most at the moment. The terrifying nature of the Sanctuary Realm had been exhibited by arbitrator Mage. He had the ability to eliminate the undead lords with a single spell effortlessly. This was extremely close to the power of divine. Even though the fire demon before them was not a real sanctuary powerhouse, it was definitely an invincible opponent for legendary mages. The fire demon ignited the entire space instantaneously with its appearance. It was as though the men were in a huge furnace. The environment in the palace, the walls, floor, ceiling, and the numerous defensive mageweths emitted a blinding glow, withstanding the impact of the demon's volcano domain. The defensive mageweths within the palace were fully functional, despite the pressure from the volcano domain. This meant that it had the ability to turn people who were not strong enough into ashes. Lin Li and the others did not dare to have any delay. They cast their elemental shields immediately to protect themselves from the tyrannical volcano domain. It was fortunate that the other mages had been following behind Lin Li from a great distance, and were outside the volcano domain. If not, they would have turned into ashes. Numbers did not matter anymore. Even if the team of mages were to cast an elemental shield together, their lack of nomological power would put them at a great disadvantage. Lin Li and the other legendary mages did not dare to waste any time they had under the protection of the elemental shield. They called onto their magical domains immediately to resist the demon's volcano domain. Domains gave them absolute control of their energy. They allowed their creators to be as almighty as the divine. After all, domains could only be withstood by domains. As the light and darkness domain unfolded, Lin Li's surroundings rapidly turned into a black and white world, and the bright red color reflected off the flames disappeared from his domain. However, under the pressure from the volcano domain, Lin Li's light and darkness domain was much smaller than usual. At the border of the domains, one could clearly see the bright red flames and black and white color constantly trying to snatch the opponent's territory like two armies in a close fight. Lin Li continuously strengthened his light and darkness domain while paying attention to the other legendary mages around. From a mage's understanding of laws, he could use the nomological power he had mastered to create a magical domain. Thus, the magical domain could be described as the total display of a mage's abilities. Lin Li certainly wouldn't miss such a good opportunity to judge other mages' abilities. Anduin was the first person Lin Li had encountered after coming to Amril. He was Lin Li's mentor who had brought him into the world of magic. However, Lin Li didn't know much about Anduin's abilities before this mission. He only knew that Anduin was a level 23 legendary mage. Anduin had fully expanded his magical domain now. A patch of green contrasted sharply with the burning flames around as countless plants started growing in his domain, vines stretched to the edge, fearlessly competing with flames for territory. Thorn domain. Lin Li was shocked upon seeing Anduin's magical domain. Typically, only the elven mages who specialized in nature magic could use this kind of plant-related magical domain. Human mages were rarely seen using this kind of domain. This wasn't because the thorn domain was weak, but the nature of its laws determined the emphasis of this domain. Given that its laws were related to the lives of plants, it was more suitable for pharmacists who dealt with herbs every day. Looking at the plants that grew in the thorn domain with astonishing speed, Lin Li secretly shook his head. Evidently, Anduin's obsession with pharmaceutics had seriously affected his progress in magic. Although the thorn domain possessed powerful strength, its attacking abilities couldn't be considered strong. Moreover, the laws upon which the thorn domain was constructed were mainly extended low-level laws, which were far less powerful than core magical mantras like darkness and light. At legendary level, the difference in terms of the strength of magical domains' nomological power wasn't very obvious. In fact, the strength of legendary-level magical domains was determined by the mage's understanding of laws. The more one knew about laws, the more powerful one's magical domain was. However, once one reached Sanctuary Realm, everyone's understanding of laws had reached the peak, and their magical domains started to transform into their ultimate form. By then, the strength of the magical domain's nomological power was the underlying factor that decided the strength of the magical domain. As such, one could easily envision the performance of the thorn domain that consisted of low-level laws when it reached the sanctuary level. Lin Li wouldn't say that Anduin's choice was totally wrong. After all, everyone had different pursuits. Given that Anduin had pretty good relations with arbitrator Apophis, he might clearly understand what this choice meant to him. This could only show that his passion for pharmaceutics had exceeded everything else, although his pharmaceutics level was terrible now. On the other hand, Anduin's competitor Rosen's magical domain made Lin Li's eyes light up. Thunder flames and gigantic boulders continuously resisted the volcano domain's pressure. Even though Lin Li detested this old man who always picked on him, he couldn't deny that the path Rosen had chosen was the one that mages should go. Rosen had displayed an element domain that contained the elemental laws of earth, fire, water, and wind. When he had incorporated all four elements into his magical domain, he had pushed the power of his domain to a terrifying level. Evidently, Rosen was much more determined than Anduin on his path of magic. Everything that he had done was to increase the strength of his magic with the pursuit of maximizing his magical power. For a mage, the most reliable power was certainly magic. While other skills could help, nothing could be as reliable as magic in the most crucial moments. Of course, Lin Li didn't think that Rosen's element domain was perfect. Rosen's biggest problem was that he was too ambitious. Earth, fire, water, and wind. Every element's elemental law was enough for a mage to spend his entire life examining it. However, Rosen attempted to completely master all four magical elements at his current level. In a way, he was taking a wrong path as well. Although Rosen's path wasn't in the opposite direction of his goal, it would make his goal seem so far away that it seemed impossible to reach. Meanwhile, Aldwin had expanded his flaming storm domain, a pure fire element magical domain. However, its laws were extended laws from the fire elemental laws. Countless fireballs fell from the sky like a storm, turning the ground into a sea of flames. The hot flames from the flaming storm domain competed intensely with the volcano domain, trying to engulf each other. Evidently, this was a domain constructed with mature legendary magic. The rules in this magical domain were all based on legendary magic. The greatest trait of a domain constructed with legendary magic was that it was extremely powerful. It was like he had solidified legendary magic into his domain. Rarely anyone in the same level could compete with such a magical domain. However, Aldwin sacrificed the space for him to level up in his pursuit for immense power. He would probably remain at his current level for his entire life, with no chance of improvement at all. Lin Li was a level 23 legendary mage like Anduin and Rosen, but his experience in battling at this level wasn't as much as the two's. After all, after understanding the ultimate form of magical domains at the Seven Realm Spiral as well as reading the Book of Eternity wholeheartedly in the half a year in the crack between space and time, Lin Li's understanding of magical domains exceeded the level that a normal person could hope for. Although Lin Li had just reached the peak of level 23 when he left the Space-at-Me Rift, his knowledge about magical domains had already reached sanctuary level. Thus, his foresight was no worse than a true sanctuary powerhouse's, and he could see many problems others couldn't. Hell! The fire demon whose body was surrounded by flames let out a deafening roar. As his roar reverberated throughout the palace, the entire building seemed to be shaking slightly. After that, the fire demon retracted all his surrounding flames all of a sudden, and shot them out with even greater speed. The volcano domain was filled with violence and rage. He wasn't using any skills, just suppressing the 4 legendary mages' magical domains with pure strength. Under the encroachment of the volcano domain, the palace's ground was completely turned into a sea of golden lava from the heat. The lava poured to all sides like a flood discharge channel that was just opened, continuously expanding the volcano domain's territory. Such scorching temperatures could make everything turn into ashes. Even the most heat-resistant infernal magic iron would probably melt into liquid under such heat. If not for the countless powerful defense mages around the palace, even Osric's proud invention wouldn't escape the fate of destruction. The battle of magical domains at such a level was more similar to collisions between domains. There weren't many skills or tricks that one could use, and everything depended on one's understanding of nomological power. Any control, any skill, and any trickery was totally useless now. It was like a head-on battle between 2 armies, the strongest was the winner. In a flash, a large proportion of plants in Anduin's thorn domain was engulfed by fire. The area of his domain was directly reduced by more than half. Anduin's knuckles that held onto his magic staff turned pale, and veins popped out on his temples. Countless intertwining vines flooded towards his lost territory, fearlessly swarming towards the flames. Typically, plants would be suppressed by fire. If it was only Anduin fighting with the volcano domain alone, the thorn domain would be instantaneously engulfed by the volcano domain. However, there were 3 other mages fighting against the fire demon, helping to spread out the damage. Moreover, Anduin's thorn domain also consisted of many extended water elemental laws. Thus, he wasn't totally passive when facing the volcano domain. After all, Anduin was a level 23 legendary master. Although the thorn domain wasn't the strongest, he wasn't shaken by the fire demon's sudden attack. Countless plants grew in the thorn domain crazily and swarmed towards the sea of fire, extinguishing the flames inch by inch. The thorn domain's territory continuously expanded once again. Although it appeared to be extremely difficult, such magical domains founded upon low-level laws had an advantage: relatively low consumption of mana and mental strength. Rosen had also shown his element domain's advantage by now. The domain that had incorporated the elemental laws of all 4 elements wouldn't be truly suppressed by any other laws when the difference in ability wasn't too big. Facing waves of scorching lava, Rosen waved his magic staff solemnly. With no need for recitation, countless thousand miles of ice spells turned the entire domain into an icy world. Under the boost of the element domain, the 1,000 miles of ice, which wasn't a very powerful magic, exhibited the strength no weaker than legendary magic. Under the boosted 1,000 miles of ice spells, the scorching lava gradually cooled down and solidified into black rocks covered in a layer of frost. This was also possible because the other mages had helped to disperse the intensity of the fire demon's attack. Otherwise, Rosen's element domain wouldn't be able to compete with the fire demon's volcano domain with his diverse but shallow understanding of nomological power. Even now, Rosen seemed to be struggling. When the lava had cooled down into rocks, new lava swarmed out, and was once again cooled. It was like a game of tug-of-war, both sides were fighting over territory little by little. While Rosen fought against the volcano domain's attacks, he looked over at his competitor Anduin with a prideful smirk on his face. As Anduin's competitor, Rosen was very clear what Anduin's magical domain was like. He had always despised Anduin's decision. As a mage who had forsaken the true meaning of magic, what right did Anduin have to compete with him for the position of arbitrator? Rosen firmly believed that his choice was the right path to reach Sanctuary Realm. However, Rosen was rather alarmed by Lin Li's light and darkness domain. As the two fundamental laws of the origin of the world, light and darkness laws were thousands of times harder to grasp than elemental laws. More importantly, these two conflicting laws were put together and constructed into a stable magical domain. This had exceeded the typical application of nomological power, and the immense mental strength required to support such a domain could probably only be possible for a sanctuary master. Although Rosen didn't want to acknowledge it, he was envious of Anduin for being able to find such a student deep down in his heart. Precisely because of this, Rosen couldn't withstand Lin Li's presence all the more. Although this was a competition between Anduin and him, a genius legendary mage like Lin Li would undoubtedly provide great support for Anduin. When the fire demon's volcano domain erupted, Lin Li's light and darkness domain also felt the immense pressure from this terrifying attack. The black and white world was instantaneously invaded by a patch of red. The sea of golden lava on the ground contrasted sharply with the black and white world. At that moment, Lin Li didn't have the strength to observe the others anymore. After all, this fire demon was close to sanctuary level, even his aura felt similar to that of sanctuary powerhouses. In this kind of direct collision between magical domains, the slightest mistake could result in death. Suddenly, numerous figures rose from the swarming lava. As if an invisible hand had been playing around with the lava, monsters that were made of lava emerged, with lava continuously dripping from their bodies. They didn't have faces, and only had a simple body and 4 strong limbs. Every one of these lava monsters possessed close to legendary level abilities. Without any team formation, the monsters walked towards Lin Li, beginning their attack on his light and darkness domain. At this moment, Lin Li also raised the Helios scepter in his hand to condense countless angels of light and dark in the light and darkness domain. Although the power of ice and snow was not used as a carrier, the bodies of the angels of light and dark were more solid than before. There seemed to be a perfect fusion of two conflicting forces. As Lin Li pointed his staff forward, the army of angels of light and dark collided with the lava monsters. The sudden collision was like the beginning of a grand and majestic war at this very moment. The spears in the hands of the angels of light and dark contained either pure power of light that could purify everything or the dark force that seemed to devour everything. When the spears pierced the lava monsters were either reduced to magma because of their evilness, or turned into black stone statues because of the devouring force of dark force. Unfortunately, the fire demon was a terrifying existence that was close to the sanctuary realm, so the strength of the lava monsters created by it had also caused great damage to the angels of light and dark. However, when the bodies of the angels of light and dark were destroyed, the power of light and darkness would lose their restraint and seem to cause a violent explosion because of the extremely opposing attributes. The powerful explosive force would also immediately rip apart all of the lava monsters in the surroundings. If the fire demon's strength was also level 23 like Lin Li's, the battle might not be very difficult for the latter. Even the explosion caused by the conflict between the two forces of light and darkness would definitely cause the fire demon to suffer great losses. However, dealing with creatures that were reaching the sanctuary realm was definitely not as simple as dealing with a powerhouse that was at the peak of level 24. The sanctuary aura meant that the fire demon had already stepped into the sanctuary realm, and it was a gap and difference in power. Hence, under the siege of the 4 legendary powerhouses, the fire demon did not lose the upper hand. The tyrannical destructive power in the volcano domain was constantly impacting their magical domains and suppressing them without caring what means the legendary powerhouses were resorting to. Among the 4 legendary mages, the level 22 Aldwin seemed to be rather weak. Although his flaming storm domain was extremely powerful, that was not enough to make up for the difference in levels. However, Aldwin seemed to be much more relaxed than the rest in the volcano domain. Although the fire demon's power was close to the sanctuary realm, it was also the power that controlled the fire element. With the understanding of the fire laws, Aldwin's resistance to fire element power was far greater than the other 3's. In Aldwin's flaming storm domain, numerous fireballs fell from the sky and smashed into the lava that was constantly flowing, but instead of attacking and moving the lava away, Aldwin integrated his own nomological power and competed for control of the fire element power in the lava, affecting the invasion of that powerful force in the volcano domain. The 5 powerful magical domains that were unfolding in the palace constantly collided, making the entire palace suddenly quake violently. Dazzling rays of light continuously emerged from the magewaves around the palace from time to time, and dissipated the power that was enough to destroy everything invisible. With the passage of time, Lin Li was suddenly surprised to find that he and others seemed to be gradually turning the situation around. The tremendous oppression from the volcano domain of the fire demon seemed to have loosened up, and they finally had the chance to launch an effective counterattack to increase the range of their magical domains. It seemed that victory was in sight, but Lin Li felt that something was wrong. Indeed, the change in the situation was what Lin Li wanted, but the change itself was also somewhat abnormal. However, at this time, Lin Li couldn't afford to think too much about it. Although it seemed that he was gradually gaining an advantage, that advantage was also obtained through unremitting efforts. Were he to slack or loosen up once, the situation would probably revert to status quo soon. Lin Li moved the Helios scepter forward a little, and the angels of light and dark that had already formed around him immediately flapped their black and white wings, and launched an attack toward the front without turning back at all. The lava monsters that were formed in the fire demon's volcano domain were driven out of the light and darkness domain, and the 2 forces continued to fight each other at the junction of the domains. Although the lava monsters were close to the legendary level, the number of monsters generated in a certain period of time was much less than before. Everyone could clearly feel that the volcano domain seemed to be gradually losing its offensive power and putting up a passive defense. Even in Anduin's thorn domain, the countless intertwined plants seemed to have formed huge green waves like an ocean, and were constantly impacting the volcano domain of the fire demon. The layers of plants were burned to ashes at high temperatures, but they instantly sprung up again to widen the range. That was what a battle between the magical domains was like. There wasn't much calculation, and it was merely a battle of control of nomological power. Although the combat power of Anduin's thorn domain was not very outstanding, the power of the magical domain during a battle of the legendary stage would rely on the mastery of nomological power. The nature of the laws was not a decisive factor. Countless ice cubes fell from the sky and fell into the lava with a loud roar. In the rising steam, the boiling lava seemed to have turned into black rocks in the blink of an eye, with a subtle layer of white frost covering it. Compared to Anduin, Rosen clearly had a better advantage when dealing with the fire demon's volcano domain because he had the element domain. Aldwin's flaming storm domain was originally a powerful magical domain, but at this moment, the flaming storm domain that was facing the fire demon could not show its powerful attacks. However, judging from the lava on the ground, he could clearly see that the 2 different colored flames were colliding with each other. Among them, the nomological power held by Aldwin had the upper hand. It seemed that obtaining victory was near them, but the flame-covered fire demon still did not seem to be angry at all, despite having lost the upper hand. In fact, it never once moved away. Is there really no way for it to retaliate? Lin Li did not believe that the fire demon that was near the sanctuary realm would allow the rest to besiege it without restraint and let itself be forced into losing. Given the current situation, the results of the battle would definitely not be optimistic for the fire demon if it were to be prolonged. The longer the battle was, the smaller of a chance the fire demon would have to reverse the situation. However, the fire demon didn't seem to realize that, and thus did not rely on the suppression of the level to obtain the desired results. Instead, it continued to let the battle go on and remain in a standstill. It was absolutely abnormal. The fire demon was not the same as the generic inferior demons that did not have any brains. While inheriting the blood of the ancient demon deities, it also inherited wisdom that was far superior to that of ordinary humans. How could it make such a mistake? Although Lin Li felt that something was wrong, he knew that given the current situation, it was impossible to really stop and investigate the reason, as that would result in him getting attacked by the fire demon immediately. The only thing he could do now was to raise his vigilance while doing his best to launch full-swing attacks on the volcano domain. However, in many cases, it was impossible to prevent some things from happening just by raising your vigilance. When everyone thought that battle had been brought under their control, 6 dark red spots suddenly lit up on the ground. Immediately afterwards, a series of crisscrossing rays of light quickly shot out of the spots, linking all 6 points together to form a 6-pointed star array. Damn it, the gates of the abyss! When the dark red lights were ignited, Lin Li knew that things were going to get terrible. Even the children in Amril knew that when the 6-pointed star array was ignited, the abyssal demon would cross the gates of the abyss and bring about endless disaster to the world on the mainland. Indeed, as the 6-pointed star array lit up, a huge dark red gate gradually emerged behind the fire demon. Through that dazzling ray of dark red light, Lin Li and the rest could see that countless fire demon were looming behind the gates of the abyss. A fire demon even ripped the corner of the gates of the abyss with his hand and was about to squeeze his body out. Lin Li was immediately shocked. It was no joking matter, all of the creatures in front of them were fire demons. With the blood of the ancient demon deities, their strength was definitely above level 20 even if they were inferior to the one in front of everyone. If all those terrifying creatures were to surge out, probably the entire Anril would be destroyed, let alone the people who were present here. At this moment, Lin Li finally understood why the fire demon, whose strength was extremely close to the sanctuary realm, had never shown his due strength despite the battle being at standstill and to his disadvantage, and instead waited calmly while not showing any signs of anger. It turned out that he'd been waiting for the gates of the abyss to open and for his peers to arrive in this world through the gates of the abyss. The fire demon in front of Lin Li was probably not just an ordinary fire demon from the 66th floor of the abyss, but a lord of the abyss, the fire demon king. Only a lord of the abyss would have the right to open the gates of the abyss and summon such a huge army of fire demons. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.